The Eagles might have missed out on the 1 seed, but they're taking full advantage of Week 18 to get a bye week. All that and more on this edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everydayers? Happy New Year and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri, here delivering you 5 episodes each and every week. Besides yesterday, took a little bit of time off for the holiday, but we are back for the new year, and so are the Philadelphia Eagles. It's a new year, but the goal is the same. Go and get a Lombardi Trophy. And how will that path start? Will it be Washington? Will it be Green Bay? But will it matter at all? But the one thing that will matter is that the Eagles starters are going to get some rest in Week 18. But before we start to talk about that, we got to talk about FanDuel. You could start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And to get started today, before I start talking, hopefully you have subscribed to the show. If you haven't already, make sure you smash that subscribe button so you can tune in to each episode as we continue to preview the Giants game and get ready for the playoffs. But some people that won't be getting ready for this Giants game are the Philadelphia Eagles starters. And just before I got ready to hop on and record this show, Nick Sirianni sat down for his press conference and answered the $100 million question for all of us. Are the Eagles going to play any of their starters in Week 18 against the New York Giants? And that answer, Nick Sirianni, he said, we're going to rest some of those guys. And you could probably figure out which guys they're going to rest. It'll probably be Saquon. It'll probably be Jalen Hurts, who is still in concussion protocol. A.J. Brown, Devonte Smith. Dallas Goedert just got his 21-day window activated for the injured reserve. He most likely will be ready to go for the playoffs, but he is going to rest in Week 18 as well. Some of the defensive starters you probably won't see. Quinyon Mitchell, I would assume. Darius Slay. Neither of the safeties. Jalen Carter. And is this smart? Absolutely. Why is it smart? Everybody wants to know, could Saquon get the record? Could he do it? Well, we're not going to find out. And I'm going to talk about why it's not really important if Saquon sets that record or not, and we know he's not going to, but I'm going to finish up the show talking about that and why the goal was always the Lombardi, and the way that you go about doing that is by being healthy. But why is this important? Why is Week 18 so important? And if you've listened to this show, you've probably heard Lou and I talk about this, that the Eagles were unfortunate in one way. And I can't really say it's unfortunate because you see what happened after the bye week. The Philadelphia Eagles were blessed and cursed with a Week 5 bye week. They played 4 games. They still had a fair amount to go after that. Do the math. You're talking about 13 games that you would have to play after your bye week. And that's just regular season. So your hope was that we could get at least get 1 week to rest our guys, potentially 2 with that Week 18 game. But in a year that Detroit is as good as they are, Minnesota is as good as they are, that those two are playing for home field advantage in Week 18, and you couldn't slip up. Unfortunately, you did. You slip up to Washington after Jalen goes out. Kenny Pickett can't get the job done in that game. But last week, you were able to pull off that victory against Dallas in a demanding fashion, in a dominating fashion, 41-7. And what did that bless you with? It blessed you with an opportunity to have a bye week, even though you didn't get the number 1 seed. Now, it's a double-edged sword, right? And I think the most interesting part about it is how long are we going to go without Jalen Hurts touching a football? That'll be a little over 3 weeks until the next time that he touches a football after getting hurt in that Washington game early. You're talking about almost 3 full games that Jalen Hurts hasn't touched the ball. But let's take a step back. Let's go to the preseason. Nick Sirianni has made it known what his view of, I would say, the NFL's equivalent of the NBA's load management, which I think is a ridiculous term, minus the innuendo that it just continues to give off every time I hear it. I just think the idea of load management in a sport is crazy. You're a professional. You don't go to a job and all of a sudden you just don't get to have 20 additional days of PTO just because. But the science part behind it, of getting to the end of the season, that I agree with. Now you can get into the argument, like, should pro players play and your fans are paying tickets and we should be able to go to a regular season game and see those guys play? Yeah, 100%. 100%. But, just like every other business, you need to have your best guys available for you day in and day out for the business to succeed. Hence why resting these guys is the smartest way to go. Because we have seen this team without Jalen Hurts. We've seen it. Look at the last 2 weeks. Yes, you beat the Giants in a dominating fashion. But do we want to go down the Josh McCown having to win us a playoff game route yet again? I don't think so. The Jeff Garcia? No, I don't think so. They need Jalen Hurts. And if part of it is Nick Sirianni identifying that some additional rest will do them well down the stretch, you got to continue to practice what you preach. If you didn't think Nick was going to start them, you just haven't followed along with the way that Nick Sirianni approaches this quote-unquote load management type of ideology. He hasn't played his starters in the preseason in 3 years. 3 years. He understands that these guys are going to get ready to go, and they're professionals, and they should be ready, even without preseason play, to be ready and go out and win games. Well, we saw the first 4 games, how that worked, but the last 11 or 12, yeah, when they're ready to go, you just need them to be healthy. And getting this pseudo bye week is the biggest blessing in disguise that the Eagles could have had. Because you could have never, you could have probably gone through some simulations and said, hey, can we get to week 18 if so-and-so scenarios play out, we could rest our guys, right? Yes. But you're never getting into that scenario where you're saying, okay, Jalen's going to take a hit in the back of the head against Washington. Are we going to potentially have to rush him back one, like they did in 2022, play more guys like Saquon, like Jalen Carter, like the stars that are going to win you games in the playoffs? What happens if we have to do that? What happens if one of these guys gets hurt? What happens if Jalen Hurts gets concussed again? If Jalen Hurts gets concussed again, he has no chance to play in the playoff game. It's gone. That is out the window. If any of those guys get hurt, it is over. There's no Terrell Owens playing on a broken freaking ankle with screws in his ankle to keep it attached to his leg. That's not happening. These guys are a little over 10 days away from a playoff game. You need them healthy. Nick Sirianni, maybe the smartest thing he did was invest in this. Yeah, we kind of joked about how Nick would do these studies in the offseason. One of those things that he did study really well is how giving these guys time off and allowing their bodies to fully heal allows them to operate at full capacity, which allows the Eagles to be the best version of themselves. Seems like common sense. Now, what happens if they are rusty and you have to play Washington, you have to play Green Bay? What's going to happen? Does getting them on the field this Sunday, is that a mistake that they're not going to be out there? Or does it really not matter at all because the Philadelphia Eagles are the far superior team? That's what we're going to talk about coming up next. And to finish up the show, we'll talk about what the ultimate goal is for the year 2025. So don't go anywhere. We'll be continuing on here, the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That wins, of course. So you could take that Abraham Lincoln and you can win $250 in bonus bets with a winning bet. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's week 18, and a lot of players in the National Football League, and you know Lou and I love these player props, have some incentives in their contract that could win them some actual big money. And if you pay attention to them, maybe a certain receiver has to have 1 or 2 more receptions to hit a certain goal. Maybe a kicker needs so many points. Well, just hone in on them and go to FanDuel and win yourself some money based off of what you think is going to happen in Week 18. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance to win $250 in bonus bets if you win. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the entire Locked On Podcast Network. All right, everydayers, Happy New Year, and welcome on back to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. If you are new to the show, I'm your host, Gino Camilleri, but if you've been cruising along through 2024 and the 7 years before that, here into 2025, you know what we do, 5 episodes each and every week. And to continue on with this episode, we are talking about, after Week 18, not to get ahead of ourselves, we still have one more regular season game, but what happens in the playoffs? What are the scenarios that could play out for the Philadelphia Eagles? Well, it comes down to 2. The Washington Commanders or the Green Bay Packers will be the team that the Philadelphia Eagles host in round 1 as the 2 seed in a couple weeks from now. I've seen some arguments, and I'm first going to say this. I don't think a lot of people on Twitter would have survived the early Eagles in the 2000s. Those were some tumultuous playoff runs. Man, that would have been a fun sight to go back and relive those days. But I've seen on some of the social media spheres, oh, I'd rather play Washington than Green Bay. Oh, I'd rather play Green Bay than Washington. Oh, I'm scared of Green Bay. I'm scared of Washington. First things first, lose that mentality. That's a loser mentality. To be scared of a team in the playoffs, coming into your own building? Come on, you can't go into a playoff run with that mentality. I'll certainly tell you this, those guys don't think anything of that. They're not scared to play either of these teams. And you know why? They beat both of them. Let's be honest about the Washington game. If Jalen's in the game, the Eagles win. We know that. We know that happens. Green Bay, will it be tough? Yeah, it's not going to be an easy game. They're going to arguably be the best 7 seed ever in terms of record. Is it going to be easy to beat either of these teams? A young Jaden Daniels, a young Jordan Love? Absolutely not. But is there any world beater in the NFL? Especially in the first round of the playoffs? Playoffs? Come on. The discussion needs to boil down to how much do you believe in the Eagles? Not what do you think of these other teams. How much do you believe in this Eagles team to get the job done? And now that I'm much more confident with. Last year we knew what was going to happen in that Tampa Bay playoff game. It was a dead dog walking, and there were a bunch of just vultures ready to go down and pick apart that Philadelphia Eagles team, and that's what happened when they went down to Florida and got their doors blown off by Tampa Bay. And that was after a month and a half of tumultuous football, of bad football. But what we've seen in the last month of the Philadelphia Eagles has been something that you did not see last year. Was good football down the stretch, even when you were banged up, and when adversity hit, you didn't roll over and die. You responded. Now, it shouldn't matter if it's Washington. It shouldn't matter if it's Green Bay. It shouldn't matter if it's Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Are you confident in the Super Bowl, rather? Are you confident in this Eagles team to get the job done? And that I can say yes. I can firmly say that every time I've had a question, it has been answered. Most recently, can the Eagles pass the football in volume? Well, the last time we saw Jalen Hurts, look at that Pittsburgh game. Pretty freaking good. Well, you just saw Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee throw 3 touchdown passes combined, almost 4, almost 5 actually, against Dallas. Question answered. What happens when adversity hits and then after a long winning streak? They bounce back. Adversity hit in that Carolina game. Adversity hit in the Washington game. Did they just roll over like they did after San Francisco last year, after Seattle? No. How you feel about this 2024 team should tell you exactly how you feel about the first round, if not every round of the playoffs. Where you know, going into these games, you have a superior roster. You do. That's why you're the 2 seed. That's why they're the 7. That's why you are hosting one, if not multiple playoff home games. If you don't feel confident with Jalen Hurts, that offense you've built, how good the defense is playing, then when will you ever feel confident? And I can tell you those guys feel confident. They know what they can do. They're not scared of anybody. A.J. Brown's one of the best receivers in the league. You think he's scared of any corner that's going to cover him? No. You think Jalen Carter's scared of any center that is going to try and block him? No. Once you have that mentality, you already lost. It's like being in the UFC. The moment you can visualize yourself getting knocked out, you've already lost that fight. Do you think the Eagles are visualizing themselves losing against Washington and Green Bay? No. Even though they just lost to Washington, do you think they are scared? No. And you shouldn't be either, because this is a good football team that is fundamentally sound, that can force a whole bunch of turnovers. They forced 5 against Washington. It took a once-in-a-lifetime generational game from Jaden Daniels with Jalen Hurts being out for 55 minutes for them to beat you. Green Bay hasn't beaten a team in the NFC playoffs all season long. Minnesota, Detroit, Philadelphia, they haven't beat any of those teams. Any of those top teams, they haven't beat them. Why would you be scared? Why? This isn't a horror movie. It's not some creature from the depths that's going to come up and get you out of nowhere. That's not happening. You know what the enemy is, especially in round 1. That mentality is something that this Eagles team does not have. I think they felt exactly like a lot of people that were saying how they felt being scared maybe about Green Bay, being scared about Washington. They were scared playing Tampa. They were scared playing every game down the stretch because they were scared of making mistakes. They were scared of doing exactly what they did. Fall into the trap of losing. Setting yourself up in a bad way to lose. This team sets themselves up week in and week out to win. And we've seen exactly that. Since the bye week, one of the best teams in football. If it's Green Bay, if it's Washington, it shouldn't matter. Why? Because the Eagles, they're going to be fully healthy. They're going to have a quarterback that has been in this situation multiple times, with a coach who has been in this situation multiple times, with a lot of same teammates who have been in this situation multiple times. Washington's still a young team. They have some older parts. Yeah, you got the Ertz, you got the Ecklers, but that's still a team that probably is a year ahead of schedule. Can they make mistakes in the playoffs that ultimately cost them in a first year with Dan Quinn? I'm sure they can. Even Matt LaFleur, somebody who's been there before himself, has made big mistakes. Now, is that saying that Nick is perfect? No. But is it a rookie Nick Sirianni going against Andy Reid in his first ever playoff game? No, that's not what this is. It's potentially playing a team that you already beat in a different hemisphere, in a different continent, in the first game of the season, which has shown they can't win huge games. And then a grudge match potentially against another NFC East team. Why would you be scared? When you knew the expectation all year was to go and win a Lombardi Trophy. If you had any fear, you wouldn't get to this point. It's looking fear in the eye and going and confronting it each and every single week because they knew what the goal was, because they've been playing with expectations all season long. And the expectation in that first game, regardless of their opponent, is to win. And then it's to win another one. And then it's to win a third game and go to a Super Bowl. Because even though it's a new year, they've had the same goal this entire time. And that's how we're going to wrap up this first edition of LOE in the year 2025, talking about, even though it's 2025, the same goal that they set when Nick Sirianni got here all those years ago could come true. In just a little bit, potentially, fingers crossed. But don't go anywhere. Gino Camilleri, host of Locked On Eagles, finishing up this Wednesday edition of the show. Rolling along here on Locked On Eagles, we are also presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most out of these final weeks of football action, and that's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash daily with fantasy player projections. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a chance to win up to 1,000. Yes, one with 3 zeros behind it times your money. You can make your picks in as little as 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, Prize Picks has you covered, and with over 10 million members and billions of winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. It's going to be an interesting week with the Eagles, but hey, maybe Kenny Gainwell will be someone you want to say has more rushing yards than you projected, or Johnny Wilson has some more receiving yards than his projection. We have a special offer for you and all our Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, everyone, finishing up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Thank you for making us your first listen and or watch of the day and of 2025. And for your second listen, make sure you go check out the new Locked On NFL in the morning with Tyler Rowland, in the afternoon with the barber, Tony Wiggins, and I'm on there every Monday morning as well, co-hosting with Ty. But if you're making this your first listen or first watch of the day, before we sign off here, make sure you subscribe to the show. We're not going anywhere. This is season 7, going in the playoffs yet again. Lou and I are sticking around through 2025. And yes, it's a new year. Did the Eagles set some resolutions? I don't think so. Because as we talked about on the intro, why do you rest your starters? As I talked about on the last segment, why do you not care about your opponent in the next round? Well, new year, same goal. The goal from the second Nick Sirianni got here and took over this roster was to compete for a Lombardi Trophy. He got there in 2022 and came ever so close. Ever so close. Lose 3 points in a game to Patrick Mahomes. 2023 was different. 2023, you had goals, and you didn't even come close. First round exit. 2024, same goal. Go and try and win a Lombardi. Now, why does it not matter that Saquon sets this record? Why does it not matter if Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, or any of the starters touch the football field in Week 18? Why does it matter who they play in Week 1 of the playoffs? None of it matters. None of that matters. Because the expectation, the egos, the want to break Eric Dickerson's record as an offensive line, to be that team that is just put into history. You have to put your ego aside. Records are great. Lombardis are better. Put that one in a quote book. Records are great, Lombardies are better. That's the goal, man. The goal has always, always, always been to win this Lombardi Trophy. Can you win it if Saquon gets banged up in Week 18 because he's trying to chase this record, and let's say he gets a yard short and gets injured? Was it all for naught? Let's say you play the starters just to give them a little play, you know? Give them a little 1 or 2 drives here, get their feet under them going into the playoffs. What happens if one of them, walking out of the tunnel, slips on a carpet like Kevin Cobb did back in 2011 with the Bills, I believe, and tears his ACL? What happens? Who knows what could happen? If you want to play into your ego and think you're maybe better than injuries or better than the goal is to win a Super Bowl, and none of that happens without putting the ego aside. These guys knew that it was going to be a pretty big room filled with some personalities coming into this year. The AJs, the Jalen's, the Saquon. These guys are superstars. And in Philadelphia, people talk about it and want to create the drama. We've seen our AJ and Jalen not even friends, the Brandon Graham whole thing. Yeah, we saw that, right? But at the end of the day, what do these guys do? Probably better than most Eagles teams that I've followed in the past. And I think we can even look at that 2017 team and say there was a lot of ego behind that team. They put their ego to the side for the betterment of the end goal. And what is that goal? Saquon wasn't signed to break Eric Dickerson's record. Jalen wasn't signed to be one of the best quarterbacks in Eagles history. Drafted, rather. Maybe he was. That was a silly statement. But you know what I'm trying to say. In that, it's not the individual accolades. Nick Sirianni doesn't care that he's the winningest head coach in the first 4 seasons of Eagles history. Like, he doesn't care about that. They care about the Lombardi. That's what it is. It is putting your ego aside to get to the finish line. Would it be so incredible to say that the 2024 Eagles team and this offensive line had the best statistical output of a running back ever in NFL history? For sure. And that would be a really cool trivia question in a dive bar when you're going to Thursday night trivias. But you know what's going to be way cooler than that? If you and a loved one take a trip to Canton in a few years, or take a trip to Philadelphia and go to their Hall of Fame section, and next to that one from 2017 is another Lombardi from the year 2024. Now that is why they do it. For the goal that if one succeeds, they all succeed, Doesn't matter if they break records. Doesn't matter if they play every single game in an 18-week season. What matters is winning these games in the playoffs to hoist a Lombardi Trophy. Put your ego to the side and go win the damn thing. It's a new year, but the goal is ultimately the same. And what else is the same is us here at Locked On Eagles, and we are going nowhere. I'll be back tomorrow with Patricia Traina for Crossover Thursday, last regular season Crossover Thursday of the year. We will see if it'll be David Harrison or Peter Bukowski the next time we have Crossover Thursday. I'll also be back Friday with another edition. We'll bring you LOE 3. Maybe I'll be making 6 picks. Maybe Lou will send 3 picks from the middle of the ocean on the cruise that he's on. Lucky him while it's snowing here in Denver. But I know we will all be locked on and locked in to the show each and every day here at Locked On Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Interact with us on Twitter as well at GC24_football. My co-host at DiBiase LOE. Follow the mothership at Locked On Birds. Make sure you check out the new Locked On NFL. Make sure you check out all of the Locked On Philadelphia shows. But until then, enjoy your New Year's Day. Sco Ducks beat Ohio State. And I'm Gino Camilleri signing off, and as I always do, fly Eagles fly.